I was very struck by that slide of what we need to do, because it doesn't focus on drug discovery, which is sort of the knee-jerk reaction to how we combat the antibiotic crisis, that we need more antibiotics. But that wasn't what you were emphasising.
No, I did, however, mention access to effective antibiotics, and we do need effective antibiotics. But if we get new drugs, unless we take on board all those other issues, the same thing will happen to them. So whilst, of course, we need to invest in drug discovery, any drug that we develop will become resistant. That's what happens. And I've seen it happen over and over again in my clinical practice, also in my public health role, and also in kind of networks of research. Anytime we introduce a new one, it will become resistant. So we do need drug discovery, of course, and also drug discovery not just for bacteria, but also for the glooming problem of antifungal resistance that we're also facing. But unless we understand those fundamentals, it doesn't matter what drug comes on board, because we still need to make sure that we use it minimally and effectively to maintain its effectiveness. So fundamentally, to look after the agents that we've got, or any future agents, we need to take care of what I've said, and recognize the role of vaccination.
Thank you very much indeed. In a second, I'm going to come back to the question of developing new drugs. But first, Sally, to engage all the different stakeholders that have been mentioned in Alison's talk is a huge job. You have to get all of society on board in this effort. I suppose the questions might be, how do you do that, and how far along the road to doing so have we got?
Well, clearly not far enough. I think a lot of people see this as a development issue, but let me remember my own goddaughter who died 2 years ago of AMR. I've been working on this for nearly 15 years, and she had cystic fibrosis but died of a drug-resistant mycobacterium. So it hits all of us, and I can tell you plenty of other stories from our hospitals, as of course can Alison. So the most fun one, and then I'll tell you another which is also fun, is our musical. So we've got a musical that started its life as the story of penicillin and Fleming discovering it and the impact it made. And then it was called The Mold That Made the World, Saved the World. But we've changed it, and now it's called Lifeline, because antibiotics protect modern medicine. They are our lifeline. And it is not only the story of penicillin and Fleming, entwined in that is a real life story of a young man aged 29 who had bowel cancer, and the operation was a success, but he died of AMR. We've transferred it from the States across to Scotland, so it all meshes. And the way we make this work is by having a professional cast, and it is One Health. There's a wonderful song about they're in the water, they're in the air, they're everywhere, you know, about antibiotics and the food chain. But actually the chorus, every week, we have a new chorus in there. School teachers, scientists, doctors, nurses, health professionals who join in as the chorus. And we even got a paper published in Nature Medicine about the impact it had on them becoming AMR ambassadors in their communities. We've played it off Broadway for the month of September 24, when we had the high-level meeting at the UN. We even got them singing 2 songs on the floor of the General Assembly, and the previous singers to do that were ABBA. So it's fabulous, and it's coming to London if you want to pop over the end of March until mid-May for 6 weeks, Lifeline. Another one I've done with support actually from the Wellcome Trust, thank you, are youth summits, and we've done 3 so far. We've been in touch with and involved over 35,000 people under the age of 25 in 3 challenges, bringing them together, talking about AMR. What's the important question that they, as youth in low and middle income countries, will run campaigns on in their own communities. And the first was washing hands, the second was biosecurity, and the third is, which we'll announce the winners, though they're all known to me, is on behaviour. And it is amazing. In the first one, 500 teachers were involved, 300 parents, 190 schools. They had games, they had all sorts of things. It is just wonderful how you can mobilise across the world.
Thank you. There's amazing stories of engagement. And then you have for instance, in 2024, the UN high-level meeting with WHO. So that was trying to engage stakeholders that are rather...
Not just WHO. They think they look after all of this. It's One Health, the Food and Agriculture Organization. Our food security is at risk because of resistance to the treatments and the overuse of antibiotics in the food chain.
I was just going to ask, how successful do you think it is being, and this is one to you also, Alison, and then I'm going to come to you, Jean, how successful it's being engaging people at high level as well as people who go to musicals or youth?
So I'm going to extend a little bit on what Sally said, because Sally was talking about some of the informal education involving youth. One of the things that was highlighted at the UN General Assembly was this is something that needs to be embedded in education. And the young need to be aware of it, just like climate change, and have some kind of literacy about it. And one of the things that was highlighted as a gap was that making sure that it's in the curricula globally. So it needs to be, whether you're in Sri Lanka or whether you're in Gabon, it needs to be part of the curricula. But learning from countries that have got the most amazing engagement projects already. And for that to work, have to work with educational leaders. So it's really important that the leaders that you are working with and influencing are not within science and public health and drug discovery, but also leaders within education. And that actually has been incredibly successful, and the program is being rolled out. Formal education and the informal engagement that Sally described.
All this dovetails very nicely with the trust in science discussions we were having earlier in the day. Okay, maybe come back to the high-level stakeholders. But Jean, on the question of models to encourage the financing of new initiatives to develop antibiotics, I know that you've been doing quite a lot of work at that in Toulouse. Of course, the problem with antibiotics is that it's hard to make money from them, and so you need incentives to get people to work on them. So would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Well, as you say, we have too little incentive. I mean, we can try to persuade, and that's a good thing to get people to engage, but there are few incentives actually not to consume antibiotics. The cost is a standard externality. The cost is borne by other people, not you. And that is compounded by the international level, by the fact that everybody would like other countries to develop the new medicines, the new antibiotics, to exercise stewardship, and basically they free ride on each other, just like in climate change. So we have this situation where we have a lot of AMR, and there's very little in the pipeline, and we need to develop the new antibiotics which are going to prevent the next contagion. And for that, the thing we have tried in Europe was to have a cash price. So basically, you try to estimate how much is needed to bring about innovation, maybe 1 billion euros, 2 billion euros. Is this really a medical thing? The economist has nothing to say about that. You just think, well, what will be the benefit, the social benefit of this innovation? And then we are going to pay the inventor 1 billion euros, say. The problem with that is that it hasn't worked. It doesn't work because countries free ride on each other. So they each hope that the other countries are going to do it, and they won't do it themselves. And as you know, in Europe, we have, for fiscal matters, we have the unanimity rule. That's why in climate change, we have a tradable emission permit system, but we don't have a carbon price, a carbon tax in Europe, for exactly that reason. So what has been tried, what is being proposed now by the European Parliament and the Commission is an indirect mechanism which is called a voucher. So a voucher means that if you're in Gothenburg and you find this antibiotic and it's perfectly good and etc., then you're not given 1 billion euros, you are given a voucher, and this voucher is tradable. So the voucher is an extension of exclusivity for, say, 6 months or a year. We could discuss whether it's a good thing or not, but it's basically an extension of exclusivity, meaning that, in a sense, the patent is extended for 1 year on something. Now, the inventor often doesn't have a patent which is valuable enough to benefit from that. So that's why it's tradable. So you can sell it to Pfizer or whoever, and then you get, and if Pfizer is willing to pay 1 billion euros, here you are. So in practice, that means that the blockbuster will buy the voucher and will pay for it. Now, is that a good idea or not? Actually, when we started this research with Pierre Dubois and Paul-Henri Moisson, we thought, not great. Because it's true that you save taxpayer money, but then you're going to end up with more monopoly power on a blockbuster drug. So instead of being 10 or 12 years of exclusivity, there will be 1 more year of regulated monopoly profit.
But, so were you thinking, though, that it may or may not be a good idea, but it's the only idea that we've got because the other ideas aren't working?
Both, actually. Yes, that's the only idea we have got because we cannot get the cash price.
Yes.
But then what we as economists did was to try to think how costly it was. And to our surprise, we found that actually the voucher was not that expensive. And the story behind that is that actually, when the exclusivity is not extended, then the price should go down because you should have generics and bioequivalent coming in. But the truth is that in Europe, they don't come in at a low price. And so there are entry costs, there is collusion with a branded drug and so on. And in the end, so we did a computation, and actually at least all the big countries in Europe, that includes the UK in our sample, basically prefer the voucher to a cash price.
Okay, thank you. I'd like both of you to come in on this, please. Sally first.
So in the UK, we have tried a different method, and it's called pull incentive.
Yeah.
We have put in place a subscription mechanism. So a company can come to us and say, I've got an innovative anti-infective. At the moment, it is antibiotics, but in the future, it'll be antifungals, it could be phage, whatever. And we score it, well, NICE, our National Institute of Clinical Excellence, scores it against a transparent, agreed scoring for innovation, what it kills, the importance. So it's like a health technology assessment, but with a societal assessment beside it. And we give it a grading. And if it is at the top level, then England gives 20 million a year, for 3 years extendable for another 15, and the other parts of Great Britain give 4 million a year. The great thing being that they have guaranteed income, and we will steward and try not to use much of it, but they'll give us as much as we want. We have conditions on this too. One, that they must steward that drug everywhere else they sell it, so they must look after it, as Alison was talking about, everywhere else they sell it. And the second is that in manufacturing, they must have a BSI standard for manufacturing effluent, so they're not poisoning the environments where they are. Now, our payments relate to our fair share, back of the envelope, of G7 GDP. So if all of G7 joined in, then pharma tell us that would be a big enough incentive to be back in the business.
Okay, so there's promise there.
Yes, and Sweden's doing a very similar program, except ours is pulling innovation, yes, and theirs is getting access, making sure that that new drugs will go through the regulatory process and be available to Swedish citizens.
Thank you. Alison.
I would like to talk about some other drugs that are linked to this argument, linked to this dialogue, which is our phenomenal advances in immunotherapy, immunosuppression, advances in oncology, transplantation, the management of autoimmune diseases, etc., which, are really challenged. Immunosuppression is really challenged by antibiotic resistance. And, you know, transplant programs have had to close down in certain parts of Europe because it's just too high risk. So I think we also need to think about another part of the drug production industry in terms of immunosuppression and oncology, because it will become increasingly worrying in terms of using these agents and, as I said, the incredible advances being made in that aspect of medicine, when actually it's too high risk because the healthcare that you're going to receive your immunosuppression will not be able to give you therapy that will be able to treat the infection that you could very, very likely get. So the kind of tipping points need to be considered here, and also to engage these other therapies that depend on us being able to get on top of infections, either prophylactically or therapeutically.
So 1 in 5 cancer patients gets a really serious infection. Latest data out of the States, the infrastructure for cancer care, inpatient wards, outpatients have a much higher level of AMR than the rest of the hospital system. If you get cancer, you should be worried. In America, the global rich north, if you get cancer in India or China and some of these other places, your gut will have masses of AMR in it, pretty certain. Bad news.
Sorry, you wanted to...
No, I think the new antibiotics will be a very good deal in a sense, given how costly it is, in terms of lives, but also in terms of money, to have the next pandemics. And then all those surgical operations and things like that we cannot do because of that, or cancer treatments. So the willingness to pay, I mean, that's an economist's word, but the willingness to pay for new antibiotics, as long as we do things right. So we economize them. A good antibiotic is not meant to be used, right? It's unlike many other goods, you need stewardship. But at the same time, it's clear that the money should be there. And the only difficulty at this stage is really the free riding issue I was mentioning. I mean, with all due respect, even the UK is not big enough. I mean,
of course it isn't.
Yeah.
But what I find amazing is I've talked to a major pharma company who's free riding, and I said, but don't your board want you to protect your other product lines? And they say, no, we don't need to. So I've started working with investors to start to raise these questions, and the questions in the food chain through fast food chains and supermarkets and intensive farming.
But it also,
the return on investment is for every euro spent, you get 28 back. So it's a no-brainer.
No, I just wanted to mention about investing in prevention. So, of course, we need to invest in drug discovery, but the bang for buck in terms of investing in prevention is
vaccines.
Yeah, and vaccine, basic infection prevention, just all of that stuff which we have at our disposal, invest in it, it will pay dividends.
Thank you. Jean mentioned at the start, and we have just a couple of minutes left, but Jean mentioned the similarity with climate change, and you, Alison, mentioned the inequitable burden of AMR on those who can least afford to pay. How do we approach that topic, that basically it's probably going to be solved from a rich world perspective of drug development at least, and also in many cases changing the way that the rich world behaves, but the burden is borne by the poor world mainly?
Well, it's every bit as complex. It's a big jigsaw, and we're talking, just like climate change, about global public goods and how we provide clean water for everyone, we provide antibiotics that people need. And we know that progress on climate change is made by bottom-up engagement, education, and by politicians playing a lead, often because they've had a family member affected, or because actually the media have played a role. And we really need to get the media talking about this much more constructively and frequently. But the high-level meeting raised awareness. But it seems to have dissipated in a way it shouldn't have done. I'm very disappointed. So I hope that the EU will sort the TEF, the voucher, and that is raising it up in the EU.
Thank you. And last comments from Jean and Alison?
I'm just, I have to put faith in the future and the intelligence of our young.
And a topic we have already mentioned several times today, investments. I mean, we kind of live in the short run all the time, you know, with climate change, with pandemics and many other things at the same time. And at some point we have to invest in the future. And that's, you know, health is a really good, health and climate change are a very good field in which you want to invest, right?
Can I just say one thing about investing in the future? I don't want anybody to leave thinking it's a problem for the future. We're living it now. It is a major challenge right now.
Investment now.
So all of you, the audience, should rise up and say, why, elders, have you not sorted this? And go for it and sort it.
Okay. On that note, thank you all very much indeed.